Ready or not, summer is coming, and Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance is on now. Right now through May 25th, get up to 70% off everything home at Wayfair. Plus, score amazing doorbuster deals all sale long and surprise flash deals on Memorial Day. We're talking thousands of products at every style and budget. Now is the time to save big on must-haves for your patio, backyard, and beyond. These savings won't last, so don't wait. Shop Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance now through May 25th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Glenn, how are you?
I'm good.
We have had this crazy thing happen with law enforcement post George Floyd, and that was all a consequence of what we're seeing today when it comes to this law enforcement staffing crisis. And I wanted to talk about what it's doing to other officers. It's
like when you start really breaking down the numbers and getting people to really commit to going into law enforcement, it's a huge problem. When you start seeing officers not wanting to be an officer anymore, but also with the hiring and retention processes that agencies are going through, like it's a major issue, because you start seeing the effects of the workloads being added on to officers who are deciding to stick it out, and to see this period of time where it's becoming harder and harder to just continue your normal duties on a regular basis.
You know, fewer officers means more calls, longer shifts, less recovery time, and this increase in pressure to do more with less. But beyond the logistics, I think that it's important for us to look at what this staffing crisis is doing to officers emotionally and physically and basically relationally.
You know, it's something funny. Like I talk about this all the time with not only my guys, and you know, one thing we're super fortunate about within our agency that we work for is we have a phenomenal chief and a good leadership model when it comes to him and what he's established. But, you know, we're going out with, we'll say 12 to 13 officers on any given shift, where I look back to when we were going through the bankruptcy within our city and everything that we were dealing with, where it was 7 officers on a good day, and they don't really know the cause and effect with that. But in their defense, they don't know any different. And it's something that, like, we who've been around for a long time have seen these kind of peaks and valleys that come with it, where they don't know like the frustration and knowing if you're going to get a paycheck the next week, but also going out to work with just a select few officers, and they think they have it hard now. And it's hard for us to sit back and say, hey, it's not that bad currently, but they don't have that true understanding of what we've all been through.
Yeah, and you're very fortunate, because there are other agencies like the LA Police Department who don't have it that way. And the psychological concept here is called chronic occupational overload. And we see this happening in not just law enforcement, but all across the board in a lot of different industries. And it happens when the job demands constantly exceed the available resources. That can include personnel, time, emotional capacity. And I think that for law enforcement in particular, understaffing creates this compounding cycle where the officers absorb the workload of missing colleagues without any corresponding increase in recovery, support, or even compensation sometimes.
And that's one of the big things, is you don't see the compensation levels going up to where they need to be. There was a proposal that one of my partners spoke about the other day of having traveling cops. So, you know, in California, soon we're going to be faced with having the LA Olympics and having the World Cup coming to the LA area. And there's concerns of staffing that. And so then you start breaking down of the government in California is talking about, well, why don't we kind of dual hire officers from other states to come out here and work this? In a way, it's like looking at the scab labor associated to it. And it's not saying that other cops are scabs, but it's more so of you can hire officer from Oklahoma at a fraction of the cost of what it would be for an officer if they were to open up the mutual aid side of things to be able to hire California sworn officers to fill those positions.
When we break down what chronic occupational overload looks like, I think a lot of the times it's working mandatory overtime without any kind of recovery window. Sometimes you are forced to absorb that emotional load of a shrinking team, and you feel the pressure not to complain because everyone else is struggling too.
I've actually been through this. When I worked for the state and I worked for the prison systems, we were forced to work mandatory 8-hour shifts after our regular 8-hour shifts. So we were working 4 16s and an 8 every week. And that wasn't by choice. Like, you were mandated to do that. And it's funny because one day I remember looking at myself in the mirror. I was 22 at the time, and I go, man, I look like I'm in my 30s already, just because that constant workload that I'm always having to be there. And I think we're seeing that in a different aspect in today's law enforcement realm of people aren't understanding the repercussions of working all the time nonstop, and you feel more in place at work than you do at home.
Yeah, and I think that there are some very identifiable ways that the staffing crisis is affecting officers right now. And the first thing that I've seen is that burnout is accelerating faster than it ever has before. There's no recovery window when the shifts never stop. And I also see that morale is quietly collapsing because pride on the job is harder to hold on to under that constant pressure.
You're not having that buy-in of people signing up to do the job for the right reasons. And when you're going into it for the wrong reasons, you start create this dynamic of, one, you start getting lower caliber persons applying for it. I mean, you can weed them out through the background process and all that stuff. But ultimately, when you're struggling just to get your numbers up to get qualified candidates, there has to be some sort of play in how you're going to get those numbers adjusted, because when you start getting those lower caliber law enforcement officers, you start leaving yourself open to more and more liability. You start seeing those viral videos where people don't perform at what you would expect a police officer to respond to.
I'm also seeing officers absorbing trauma without the adequate support, because more calls with fewer people means that there's less time to actually be able to process things. And home life is actually what's really taking the hit, because exhaustion and emotional depletion follows officers basically through their front door. And the most experienced officers, they're the ones that are leaving first and taking irreplaceable knowledge and that stability with them.
And with these new officers, and another thing we feel in law enforcement is we don't prepare the new people coming in to be able to kind of project what the patterns are going to be in the future, and to allow them to create that separation between work and home life. And it's something, we train on safety, we train on all this stuff, but we don't train on how to still function as a human being outside of that law enforcement job.
I think one of the most important things that you can do to be able to protect yourself during this crisis, and Clint, I know this is something that you preach all of the time, it's to get involved with your union. It's massive, because one, you start seeing what can be done and what cannot be done, but also it's fighting for the rights that we have as law enforcement and being familiar with the ins and outs of the inner workings of what can go on. Because it's easy for us to sit back and complain about what situation we're in, but when you start getting involved in that and you start affecting that change to embetter and empower officers because we each have those struggles, we have those mindsets that we get into, but when we actually get involved with it, we have the right to actually fight for our team, our people, and on a regular basis. So for those who might not be familiar, talk about the difference, Clint, in an officer who wants to justifiably complain out there on the streets about what's going on with this crisis versus somebody who shows up and takes an hour out of their own free time to be able to show up to one of these meetings.
It's the best scenario to kind of explain it as is like, you look at our elected officials. People complain about our elected officials in the political realm on a regular basis. But then when you ask them, well, did you vote? And they say no. It's when you don't have a voice at that table. One, we tell people in the public all the time of, if you don't report this crime, we don't know about it. And it's very true. There's a lot of crime that goes unreported on a regular basis because people go, oh, well, I don't want to waste their time. Well, if you're not letting your voice be heard and getting educated on the ins and outs of what's going on or what's occurring, you get to a spot of, we can complain all the time about anything, but when we start affecting that change for the better for us as individuals, like, you have that ripple effect and you get more people motivated and wanting to be involved.
Something else important is to learn how to separate the institution's failures from your personal worth. So the crisis, even though it might feel like it, is definitely not a reflection of your value or your calling.
When you start getting into the law enforcement realm, and it's something that a lot of us, we were called to. This is what we want to do because we want to, you'll hear the general answers, oh, well, I want to protect and serve. I want to provide what I can for our society. But in all reality, it's, how are you also protecting and serving your own life and your own livelihood? And you want to create a balance between the two.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.